Using a 13mm socket, we're going to go ahead and remove this bolt here and this bolt here. Using a pry bar, I'm going to go ahead and remove this caliper itself. Now I want to go ahead and use a tool to go ahead and support the brake unit itself. Put this up out of the way. Using a 21mm socket, remove this bolt and this bolt here. With those two bolts removed, go ahead and remove the caliper bracket, grab the rotor, pull that off and set this aside. Now what we want to do is use the C-clamp to compress these pistons back into the caliper. What we're going to do is we're just going to put a little bit of tension on here. Then what we're going to do is come on over on this side here. We're going to crack open the bleeder screw here. You want to make sure you have a catch can underneath or rags or towels because brake fluid will come out. Once you get that loose, you should see brake fluid starting to come out a little bit. We're going to slowly compress the pistons into. Once the pistons are compressed in, go ahead and tighten the bleeder screw. And grab your rags. Get clean down the caliper. And if you want, go ahead and spray it down with a cleaner. Remove the C-clamp. And the old pad. And you see the pistons are compressed in. Now I want to pay attention to is the mobility of these slide pins here. They are both pretty free. But we're going to pull out the sliders and just put a little extra grease in there. So what you can do is if they're nice and free floating, just press it on one side. Pull it out like so. I'm going to go ahead and repeat for the upper one. Go ahead and hang your caliper up again. You want to go ahead and clean these up. Do an inspection for any type of marks or scoring. Everything looks good. So what we could do is take a little bit more grease. We're just going to put some inside the boot. Just run that through. And take your pin, pop that in, and push it right through to the other side. You work that boot onto the lip of the other side of the slide pin. And just wipe everything down. Now when you're doing this here, you want to make sure that there's no splits or tears in the rubber boot. If there's any tears or splits in the rubber boots, you want to go ahead and replace those. Now we have our caliper bracket here with our old pads in here. What we want to do is remove these units. I want to now go ahead and pay attention to the type of sliders that are in here. I want to now go ahead and remove these and set them aside. You can use a screwdriver to do so. Just kind of work that out. Do the same for this side. With the sliders removed, you want to now go ahead and clean up the brackets themselves using your wire brush. Clean off any rust and clean up any of the chunky pieces that might be on there that are going to cause any type of fitment issues with installing the new hardware. Once everything is cleaned up, go ahead and repeat for the other side. Let's give these a quick spray down. You want to go ahead and pay attention to your mounting hardware. Go ahead and use wire brush. clean off any of the debris on these here. It's just going to make that much easier for reinstallation later on. If the bolts are damaged in any way, now's the time to go ahead and replace them. Repeat for the other bolt. Now when replacing your hardware, you always want to pay attention to the shape of it. This particular one has an extension off the side, so make sure your replacement part looks just like it. Same with the other one. Put a light coat of grease where the sliders are going to fit. And go ahead and snap the slide unit into place and repeat for the other side. Before we install our wheel hub, we're going to go ahead and put some anti-seize around the hub itself. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the brake rotor. I'm going to go ahead and line up our caliper bracket. We did clean up the bolts and put some anti-seize on here first. And go ahead and get the bolt started by hand. I'm going to go ahead and torque down the caliper bracket bolts to 130 foot-pounds. Do this for both bolts. Now I want to go ahead and install your brake pads. So to keep your pads stable and not popping out from the rotor shifting around, I usually grab a spare nut that's been sitting around. Grab one of the lug nuts. If you happen to have a lug nut that has a through hole, that'll be perfect because the nut will be able to thread down further. And just kind of thread that on by hand. That'll keep that rotor nice and stable. Now we can go ahead and slide our pads into the correct position. Once you have these in place, what we're going to want to do now is grab your brake caliper. Make sure that your sliders are moved in. We'll go ahead and line this up, slide this over the pads. Now what we're going to do is take our lower caliper bracket bolt and slide that in. Just get that started a couple threads. I'm going to move to the upper bolt. I'm going to line this up. I want to go ahead and make sure that the caliper is popped into the tab. And we'll go ahead and get this bolt started. Just get it started a few threads. Then we'll go ahead and snug those down. So now we're going to go ahead and snug down the caliper bolts. Do the same for the top. Now we're going to go ahead and torque the caliper bolts to 24 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and remove the nut here. Once this is done, you want to go ahead and hop on the vehicle, pump up the brakes, open the hood, and check your brake fluid level. If you do need to add any brake fluid level, check the manufacturer specifications, add fluid as necessary, and then install your wheel. I'm going to go ahead and install 2 of our lug nuts and thread them on as far as they can go. Now we're using a large pry bar between the 2 studs here on the lug nuts so we don't damage the threads. I'm going to go ahead and torque the axle nut down to 185 foot-pounds. Now we can go ahead, remove the lug nuts, and install your wheel. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the wheel. And get all the lug nuts started by hand. Then we're going to go ahead and snug up the lug nuts. I'm going to go ahead and torque down the lug nuts to 135 foot-pounds.